begin to drift south and eastward. The central and eastern parts of Kansas will very probably be cloudy in the morning, and then western Kansas will begin to get increasing cloudiness by tomorrow afternoon. Today, however, very, very pleasant reading. 73 up in the Goodland area, 72 at Garden City, 70 reported by Dodge City and Liberal, 72 over by the good folks of
Alright, welcome back. So if you watched the first portion of our first episode here, you know that the next tissue is cartilage. So cartilage is like this rubbery, kind of plastic-like material that's found in the joints of our body. And that cartilage kind of serves as something that reduces friction, reduces resistance when we're using our joints and bending our joints. It also serves kind of as something that keeps the joints in alignment, kind of helps with congruencies is what we call those. We call them congruencies. They kind of fit together, helps it fit together more like a puzzle piece. And it also serves to act like a buffer between bones. If you were to think about not having any cartilage in your knee and you were to jump up and down and your femur were to make direct contact with your tibia and your fibula, that would be really unpleasant. There'd be nothing between them to kind of help soften that load. And oftentimes this tissue is injured when the joint is fully locked out or loaded, and then it moves in some kind of extreme manner. Either it can be a normal type of movement, just beyond your normal range, your available range, or it can be an abnormal movement. So we'll go ahead and look at the next slide and kind of dive into that a little bit further. So if you take a look at the slide there, you can also see that cartilage takes a long time to heal. 2 months to 2 years. And that's because, surprise, surprise, cartilage has very little vascularity. Sometimes. For instance, the cartilage in your knee or the menisci are two C-shaped rings that kind of keep your knee in alignment, help things move smoothly, keep it working right. They have different levels of blood supply. 2 inner thirds of that cartilaginous horseshoe virtually has zero blood supply. And it takes forever to heal, if any healing happens at all. And typically when you injure this area, you're going to be consulting a surgeon to have that trim out. That's just what they do. The outer third, however, has blood supply, and it can heal over time. Typically they'll go in and suture that up and put you on crutches and say stay off of it for a while. One unfortunate thing, though, about cartilaginous injuries is that imaging really is the best way to tell exactly where that tear is and exactly how bad that is. But if you get some imaging done and they say, hey, you know, it can heal up, go ahead and hit the PT, you can treat it. But you're going to be looking at doing a far decreased load from what you're typically used to doing, and then you're going to be doing thousands of reps. Yes, thousands. You thought we were doing a bunch for the tendon. And again, that's just because of poor vascularity. In terms of cartilage tears at the knee, the Total Gym, yes, the Total Gym, endorsed by Chuck Norris, is a physical therapist's best friend. It allows patients to do decreased load, about 20% of their body weight, which is ideal for that meniscus. And then people can do tons and tons of reps in that position, and they don't really get fatigued, and it doesn't cause too much pain. And much like ligaments, though, if you have a cartilage injury, or you think you do, err on the side of safety and take some time off to rehab before you head back out, because you don't want to make things worse. Bottom line is we want to avoid making things worse so you don't miss more time doing the thing you like to do, which is chunk some plastic. All right, our next to last tissue type, bone. Now, bone is unlike any of the other tissues that we've kind of discussed in a couple of ways. I'll talk about one of those ways when we get to the slide. But most importantly, bone is significantly more rigid than any of those other tissue types. So bone can really take a lot of force in terms of compression. Again, think about that in the last section about cartilage when I talked about jumping up and down and the forces that go through your femur and then down into your tibia and fibula. It can take that force really pretty well. But it doesn't do such a great job at taking the forces in terms of if we were to bend a bone or torsional force, think of like twisting. Bones don't take a lot of twisting force. They don't do a great job at that. But Bone fractures out on the course are obviously the worst case scenario injury, because they're require the most help. If you were to break a bone out on the course, you would definitely have to stop, and you definitely have to get that taken care of. But they're also the least common in my experience. That doesn't mean it's impossible. So let's discuss what healing time and rehabilitation looks like.
So yeah, bone is a funny tissue, and yes, it is a tissue that produces other tissues like blood and its ground elements. But it's a funny tissue because the only time you hear about people injuring bone out on the course, it's from a fall. It's either someone slipped on a rocks, or they tripped over a tree stump, or a root from a newly cleared path. No one steps up to rip a high-speed driver, cranks it really hard, or so hard that they snap their femur. That does not happen. I've never heard of that. If you have, then I would suspect that something far more sinister is the cause there. But your typical recovery time for bone injury is 6 to 12 weeks. And honestly, 6 weeks isn't that bad if you fractured something. Some of you folks may live in colder areas of the country where winter season is months and months long. So you have sat out for more than 6 weeks before. You know what that's like. Obviously, having to sit out for 6 weeks of playable weather is not the ideal. But if you have a fracture or break and you got to play on it and make it worse, you may be looking at missing the entirety of a season. If it's a short season, that's even worse. I cannot imagine missing a year of playing disc golf. In my mind, 6 weeks is cake then, and nobody wants to miss the entirety of a season. Nobody wants to be out longer than that. But much like a ligamentous injury, I would really caution you against playing with a fracture. Bone bruising, that's fine, as long as you aren't causing more pain. But the forces that you create when you're tossing discs is too much for healing bone. If you think about what a break looks like or a fracture looks like on an x-ray, it's that tiny little space, that tiny little line, or that tiny little gap between the two bone fragments. You want those to stay close together. You want those to stay approximated so that they can heal, so that bone can become stronger again. That's the whole point of casting. But if you go out and play 18 holes, you're more than likely to have moved those fragments away from each other or twisted them on top of each other forcefully and out of alignment at least 18 times. And that does not promote healing. You can load the fracture. I'm not saying you got to lay in bed for 12 weeks or for 6 weeks or however long until you know it's healed. I mean, bone grows in response to stress. Research has shown us that individuals who strength train or resistance train have lower incidences of osteoporosis. So strength training or force, external force to bones makes them stronger. It makes them grow. That's true. However, it would be best if you took the time off if you have a fracture to work on another part of your game, like putting, because you and I both know that you need it.
Damn.
I'm mostly just saying that for my sake. Mostly.
Finally, at long last, the mystery tissue that I talked about in the intro, and that tissue is nerve tissue. That's right. The reason I didn't name the specific tissue in the intro is because it is very commonly mistaken for an injury to one of the other types of tissues that we've covered already. Oftentimes, when someone comes into the clinic, they complain of what really is nerve pain as something else, like muscle pain. Oh man, I have this kind of deep pressure in my calf. It's weird. Or some kind of strain, like, oh man, my forearm really hurts right here, and it's causing such and such symptoms. Or some kind of muscle weakness. Or maybe they even think that it's a tendon or a ligament injury. And nerve issue can be tricky like that. It can, because it can present with these other symptoms that may seem like something else. Nerve tissue is also really tricky because it varies so much in time frame for healing. I've seen statistics that say that nerve tissue regenerates at about an average of 1 inch per month, which, if you were to think about a really serious injury to the sciatic nerve, which starts in the buttocks and can travel all the way down to the tips of your toes, if you were to have a really serious sciatic type injury or entrapment and you went long enough and you didn't treat it long enough and it was able to injure that nerve enough, and you could be looking at years before you restore that nerve function. So let's go ahead and take a look now at our last slide and see what else we can learn about nerves.
So as you can see, first, there is no specific time frame for healing, and that's really just due to the high variability in nerve damage and healing. But definitely don't expect those nerve injuries to go away overnight or to get better really quickly, because they just don't, generally speaking. Next, you'll notice the first bullet point contains a couple of really big words that I use to impress you and to make you think that I'm way smarter than I actually am. Basically, axoplasmic flow is the current of nutrients and goodies that travel through nerve cells, and those are kind of in charge of maintenance and cell repair and regeneration after injury. Entrapment syndromes are the syndromes that where nerves kind of get caught or compressed by a muscle or some other anatomical structure, and that kind of disrupts or stops this axoplasmic flow. So, more or less, when a nerve gets compressed or entrapped, those nerve cells are not able to function like they're supposed to, and eventually they will die if they're not taken care of. And this does lead to that increased healing time. In terms of rehabbing nerve injury, man, you're going to be looking at doing 2 to 3 sets of upwards of 30 reps several times a day. You'll be doing nerve glides, nerve flossing, nerve stretching. All those things are some things we're going to talk about in a future episode. But those are going to help break the nerve loose and increase the nerve length. Now, can you play with a nerve injury? Sure you can. But just as long as you aren't making your symptoms worse. If you start to experience more pain, or you start to experience new symptoms like tingling or numbness or burning, you should definitely stop and work on addressing the nerve irritation head on, because that's a sign that you are increasing the entrapment or you are increasing the nerve damage.
Hey, that's it. You made it. That's it for the first installment. Thanks so much for tuning in and watching until the very end. Some of you may have skipped around if you knew what you were looking for, and that's okay. My hope is that this first episode serves as kind of a good starting point, just in understanding injury. And if you need to, you can reference this video later on in when we're looking at other episodes. We're talking about specific types of injuries, and then specific types of rehab things, and then even some prehab things. And then you don't have to hear me drone on and on and on about these tissue types again and what that really looks like. PhysioDisc is on Facebook, it is on Instagram, it is on Twitter, and it is on Snapchat. So after you subscribe to this channel, please feel free to follow us on all those other accounts as well. Now, I'm looking to do some giveaways in the future. I'm not sure what I'm going to be giving away just yet, and I'm also not quite sure about all the details of eligibility. But once I have that information, I will definitely make sure I put out some kind of post to the various social media accounts so that everybody can know about that, be aware of that. But it would probably be in your best interest if you would like to win one of those giveaways, to like and to follow each of those. That would be really helpful. So please, if you have any questions or comments, leave those below in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond as best I can. And last but not least, if you liked what you heard here today or what you saw here today, please share that. Please share that with whoever you can. I'm not against you sharing this information at all. And lastly, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Now, however, it's moving into the central part of the nation with a couple of high-pressure cells behind it.